Hello everybody, and thanks Claire, you've done me a favour there. I'm not under as much pressure. I won't keep you too long. I know the tea and coffee break is next. But really, I suppose the first point I want to make is that myself and Paul, when we sort of originally discussed the idea for the conference, it's really just to get, to put Newry on the map, the e-commerce map, if you like, and to make sure that businesses in the area understand that this is a huge opportunity for us. And it's great to see such a big turnout today. So I run a brand and digital marketing agency here just outside Newry, Mitso. So we class ourselves as a transformative growth agency, and really what that means is we work with businesses to try and grow their brands through purpose-led design and digital strategy. And I suppose where I want to start when I was kind of putting this presentation together, what I think is really important for us to do is to almost look back before we look forward. And this is a picture actually of Hill Street in the 1900s that I find on the internet. And it just shows a sort of bustling sort of trade environment there on Hill Street, which is probably different to what we see nowadays. It's changing. The dynamic of how we shop is very much changed. And about 87% of individuals in the north will have purchased online in the last 12 months. So that's a huge cohort of consumers that shop differently to maybe how they used to. And B2B Commerce actually did a report recently in 2023 to look at this, and actually found that the stats in the north are quite limited in the fact that we aren't necessarily looking at this as a growth area as much as we should be. By 2030, it's suggested that there's going to be about 180,000 jobs and a growth of about 4 billion in gross value add, which is a huge opportunity for us. And sorry for the really long quote here, but one of the things I think we need to understand first before we move into how do we do this, how do we capitalise on e-commerce, I think what's really important, again, to keep things simple, and that's very much a theme of today. Don't go into this thinking that you have to be all bells and whistles. We need to just start. We need to make a start. And we're perfectly placed to do that. And the best place to start is really to try and find or to get more of an understanding of who your consumer is. And I really, really love this idea of the job to be done. And this is a guy from the Harvard Business Review, and this is really a random story. But basically they did a lot of research around how do we market to consumers? How do we put products in front of them? What is it that's important to consumers? And what they found is there was a study done actually in McDonald's randomly in the US about people buying milkshakes. And they had this demographic profile of the person who would buy a milkshake and would be most likely to buy a milkshake. So they studied them, they watched them come in through the door, all the things that they liked about the milkshake, and that's how they did their marketing. But actually, what they found was we need to understand why they're buying it, at what time, how they're buying it, are they on their own? And what they found was these people were coming in at 6:30 in the morning, between 6:30 and 8 every single morning to buy a milkshake. I know this is so random. And actually, it was really interesting because what they found is the job to be done wasn't being done well by a banana or a donut or a bagel. It was the milkshake. And it was a really bizarre reason for it. It was that they had a long journey to work ahead of them. And this milkshake was their company to that journey. And McDonald's totally changed their marketing approach to not necessarily be about the assets or the benefits of the product itself, but what the job was to be done. And I think that's how we sort of view e-commerce, when we're building out websites, for example, or activating campaigns, is we always try to understand what is the job that the consumer is trying to do. That's all they care about. We sort of have a very fickle consumer base now. They're not as brand loyal as they used to be. And so we really need to get to the heart, I suppose, before we touch e-commerce, of what is the job that the customer is trying to do. So if we look at, say, 3 scenarios of consumers, consumer 1 wants to discover. They want to discover new brands and new products. Consumer 2 wants to click and collect. And consumer 3 wants to book online. Now, how many people have been to Europe in the last, say, 5 years, 10 years of your life, and have picked up your mobile phone and done a search for a cafe or restaurant? If you can just show your hand. Anytime you're on holidays. So you have all these active consumers in a European city or in Newry, because this is what happens. People are on their mobiles, they are searching for products and services, and they want you to be in front of them. And what's happening at the moment is, as businesses, we're not really necessarily there in the first place. So we really need to look at how do we be there and what channels and tools do we need to use to get there. And what's also really interesting recently, there's been a lot of research done on the conversion funnel. And the conversion funnel was normally very linear in terms of, the route to sale. So, you've awareness at the top, right down to sales at the bottom. But the research now shows that it's much more of a loop. Consumers enter the sort of buying process at different points, and they sort of rally around it, and they discover and they use different channels and tools, and they're constantly moving around it. And that's where we need to understand this and how we capitalise on that. So the first step really is in they sort of engage and discover your brand. They will then explore everything about it. They will then evaluate, are you the right brand for me? Are your products and services right for me? They will then take action, and then they will remain loyal and be retained, I suppose. And as Claire alluded to earlier, there's a huge potential there to retain the people that you have and potential for growth. So I don't have too much time, so this is very much a quick fire round of the tools and techniques to do that. But in that first stage of that loop, how do people discover you as a brand? And there's a myriad of ways that you can sort of achieve that. And I suppose there was recent research in the UK suggested that the top 3 ways that people discover you as a brand is Google, social, and recommendations. And interestingly enough, actually, recommendations was number 2. Number 3 was social. And that is at that very point of discovery, the very first time they discover you. So I would almost argue that recommendations aren't dead, very much alive. So always remember that the offline experience is almost just as important, if not more important, which is why I would be a huge advocate of bricks and mortar and that customer experience and building that customer experience in store, because no amount of online or digital marketing will ever overshadow that if you have a bad experience in store. So in terms of Google, to keep things really, really simple, try and look at where, just do a search for your products and services in your local area or in Ireland as a whole. Where are you showing up? Are you showing up at all? Is there an issue? We did some research recently with a client and they were on the 7th and 8th page of Google on a very, very small marketplace. And they didn't even know it because they hadn't really necessarily delved deep into the research. So they weren't even there in the first place. So they were thinking, why are people not coming to us? They're not coming to you because they don't know about you in the first place. And then in terms of social, so in terms of Google, what I would say to you is Google My Business. Make sure you have a profile, an active profile on Google My Business, very simply. Make sure that you're doing research on the keywords and phrases that people are using to find businesses like yours. And we use tools, there's free tools out there called Google Keyword Planner and Search Console, and we also use a tool called SEMrush, which is quite good as well. And obviously paid social is obviously a huge element of this. And what I would recommend to you and say to you, I suppose a plea as well, is to remember that there's loads of local marketing experts and marketing agencies that can help you to do that. But I would always suggest that, if you're going down the route of paid social, paid Google, to use an expert to help you do that. And finally, then, one of the things that we, I suppose, forget about in all of this discovery process is forums. So, for example, if you have a service-based business in hospitality, making sure that you have an active profile in TripAdvisor, that's where people are looking. And I'll kind of talk about that a wee bit more, about that discovery process. But discovery is quite complex. It's not straightforward, but just make sure that you're there in the first place to capitalise on it. What I've done, I suppose, for these couple of slides is also layer on how that looks then for B2B. So Google search obviously is huge for B2B customers. And I take the example of me sort of switching accountants about 2 years ago. I did a Google search. And the reason I wanted to switch accountants is because we were moving to a new piece of software. And I needed somebody who was Xero approved, or a Xero sort of advocate accountant. And I just did a search for Xero accountants in Newry, and up popped Malone Accountant, who I now use. And really, that's what I'm saying. He was just there. I went onto his website. I understood that they knew their stuff. They write blogs on this as an expert piece. So again, it's that initial impact that has, making sure that you're knowledgeable on the subject that your consumers are looking for. LinkedIn is obviously huge as well. As I say, I don't have too much time now to go into this, but I wouldn't forget about business influencers and backlinks. So backlinks is just a very fancy term for somebody else recommending you, and it's probably one of the most powerful SEO mechanisms to use, is to make sure that you have profile listings on the likes of Newry Chamber's website, any of those citation websites that you can have backlinks to your site from theirs, gives you much more domain authority. And don't forget about your stakeholder network. Make sure that, people, partners that you use, stakeholders that you're involved in, whether it be the chamber, make sure that they are advocating for you also on their socials and leverage their wider following. So once somebody has discovered your brand, and I'm taking this lovely screenshot from Cocoon as a best case example, and it doesn't do your site any justice, by the way, but it's really putting the effort in first and foremost to developing your brand. So again, don't touch digital marketing unless you do some work on your brand. How it looks, how it feels, the tone of voice. We do a lot of groundwork on that before we even touch any digital marketing or e-commerce. And make sure it aligns with your audience as well. I would also be a huge advocate for Shopify for e-commerce. So pick a trusted platform like that. Unless it's something that you really, really need to be customized, I would suggest Shopify over any other platform, e-commerce platform. Speed is another thing that we forget about, and is probably one of the most important things to remember for conversion rate optimization, making sure that your websites are really, really speedy and as speedy as possible. And the biggest thing that slows your website down is huge images. So what we tend to find is we'll do all this sort of really lovely optimization work on websites, and about a year or 6 months down the line, the staff maybe in the team are starting to add loads of images to the site and slowing it way down. So there's really good free tool, Google Page Speed Insights, that will help you to look at what your speed is on both mobile and desktop. And 9 times out of 10, your mobile speed is going to be shocking compared to desktop, but it's important to regularly review that. Again, just to briefly touch on how we sort of build out e-commerce sites, we would map journeys. So we're very, very strong in this, as Siobhan will probably attest to. So from start to finish, I just encourage you all to map out what is the journey that the customer takes from the minute that they land on your website to the minute that they buy, and just understand where there's maybe sticking points and things that you have to review and improve on your sites. And if you haven't a website at all, just sit down with your team and map out the journey that a customer takes. And the insights that you will garner from that alone are incredible, and it will help you to sort of develop out your menus, even as simply as that, on your website. And then in terms of that layering piece on B2B, what do people explore on your website as a B2B business? And a couple of years ago, when we redeveloped our own website, I just knew nobody's interested in anything other than what we've done for other people. So we very much focused on case studies. What have we done? What projects have we done? Who do we partner with? Who is trusting us with their brand and digital marketing? And that to me is really, really important for B2B. And making sure your blog is kept up to date, and then also making sure that your brand aligns with your consumers. And don't worry, I'm nearly at the end of this journey. But in terms of then evaluating, so you've got them onto your site, they've discovered you, they like what you do. We have to then understand the changing dynamics of how somebody evaluates you as a brand and your products and services. And that has changed dramatically with the advent of TikTok. So about 70% of the TikTok users in Europe at the minute use that as a sole channel to plan their travel and their trips abroad. So people are actually planning their trips, and I've heard a load of people talk about this recently, that they will go onto TikTok as opposed to TripAdvisor to look at a hotel, to look at a venue, to look at whatever the case may be, because it's given the visual, it's given real life stories from real consumers who've been there. And that is better than any written content. So be aware that TikTok is not necessarily a scary place. It's a place for you to show and to encourage, I suppose, users to show your products as well. So in terms of that evaluation stage, make sure that you what they're doing really is evaluating your range of product, and they're also evaluating how much you care about them and they know about them. And what I would say is that AI, at the minute, there's a lot of really, really good tools. There's a tool called Shopbox AI, which is almost like the equivalent to Shopify. It's a company in the south, and what they're doing is building platforms which are entirely based on AI personalising your experience. So when you land on the site and you view products, the next time you go back to the site, they're the first things that you see. And that, to me, is a really interesting thing, and I think that's going to be something that really changes in the next couple of years, is to make sure that if somebody goes onto a product page on your website, that you have recommendations underneath them which are based on what other customers have viewed and other sort of suggested collections as well. And then in terms of, again, just to skip over a wee bit, but that B2B piece, what are B2B consumers evaluating when they get to that stage? What they're evaluating, and for me personally in that accountant discovery piece, what I was evaluating was how much do they care, how much are they an expert, how much do they know, how much can I trust them? And the best way to do that as a B2B consumer is, making sure that you have your blog kept up to date all the time, and making sure that you're on LinkedIn, both as a person and a company, to show that you are an expert in your field and that you understand their challenges and concerns. And the final things there was, or to sort of mention on that, would be LinkedIn newsletter is actually a really powerful tool as well as a B2B business, and making sure that your partners, even simple things like having testimonials from your partners who've worked with you. There's no point in having a lovely big case study and there's no reference point from the consumer or from the client. So that's something we really try to focus on as well. And lastly, so once you've got them to the stage that they're about to take action, this is a brilliant girl on LinkedIn, and I'm going to forget her second name, but her first name is Stuti Karuthi, I think it is. I'll get your name at the end if anybody wants it. But she just focuses solely on conversion rate optimization, and to keep that really simple, what that is improving a product page and what's on a product page to make sure that you get more sales. And these are two examples here of an Aveeno moisturiser, and she completely redeveloped the product page to be more succinct and summarised, and making sure that all the key USPs of the product were really visible. So it's spending time on your product pages is extremely important. And there's lots of insight out there on conversion rate optimization. I would encourage you to look at that if you're building an e-com site. And this is a lovely example from Laura's site, because yes, you've got them onto this really pretty product page, but what do they do when they get to checkout? And I think that's something that we all really forget about. We forget to do these tests ourselves. Go and put something in your cart on your own websites, put it into the checkout and do it yourself. Just make sure that you're constantly testing that as yourself and as your teams. And there's one point that I would pick up here on Laura's site, if she doesn't mind. And it says, if you're keen on using click and collect option for the order, please make sure to pop your billing address in the field below. So that one wee simple line, and even how it's written, pop it in, it's very casual, but what it's doing is it's encouraging people to use that click and collect service as a local customer. And of course that's going to make you do it. And it's just telling you, make sure you just fill in your billing address. It's really simple. And the other things that I would sort of point out here at the cart is making sure that you've a variation of payment methods at the bottom there that you can see, and also that you're encouraging cross-sell and upsell. So if you notice at the top, I'm not sure if you can see this, I had something in my cart and there was 2 other items below it that the website was suggesting that I add, and that's really just trying to get a wee bit more sale from a customer. And finally, just not forgetting about service-based businesses. This is something that we do forget. And I'm a big advocate of digitalisation, not just from an e-commerce perspective, but what can we do very, very simply as a sort of B2C service-based business or a B2B business to make that transaction easier for the consumer. And if you're a service-based business, like I just looked at a couple of examples of what I do as a consumer. What do I book online? On my day-to-day, week-to-week. And these are a couple of things that I just pointed out. Was I book my gym class on an app that my gym instructor uses. I check availability of a local restaurant because I couldn't be bothered speaking to somebody on the phone, and that is the truth of it. I book my kids swimming on a portal that they have developed. I book my nail appointments online because again I don't have time to speak to someone, and that sounds awful, but I'm sure there's people in the room the same. And the final thing that I found really interesting actually was click and collect. I would use click and collect for groceries all the time, but one thing I don't necessarily use it for locally is clothes. And again, that's personal preference, and this is where the joined up approach has to be for bricks and mortar and e-commerce, is to make sure that you're using those both together. You know, I will maybe browse a website. I love Snobs, by the way. I see Milena here today. And I will browse their website all the time, but I'll always go into store. And the reason I do that is because I love the experience that I get. I want to try things on, and I want to support local. And before I move on as well, I have a friend in Donegal who's a very funny girl, and she said, why would I use Amazon when I have a shop down the road that sells me the same thing? She's a big advocate of local, and I think we have to almost change our mindset as consumers locally as well, is to make sure that we're supporting local all the time. And finally on this slide as well, we work with a pharmacy actually in the south to develop, again, it's looking at those opportunities in your business. Don't overcomplicate it. But what are the things that are slowing your staff down on a day-to-day basis? And they were getting hundreds of phone calls every day to get quotes for prescriptions. And we said, we can white that out with a simple contact form. Upload your prescription. It could be different in the north, but they were able to upload their description, put in their pharmacy of choice, put in their details, and it sent an email in. And it, you know, it wasn't overly complex to develop, but it is, again, just looking at those opportunities for growth. And finally, just on B2B actions. Again, when I talked about Aidan and transacting with Aidan, I knew that he was the accountant for me because he sort of had very much a sort of same digital mindset as I had at the time. And what he does now is he offers sort of appointment booking on a tool called Calendly, which I find really amazing tool. And the reason I find that is because you're not going back and forth on an email marathon chain to say, when suits you, I can do this date. So Calendly is literally just an appointment booking tool. Send a link, book in your time, and that's you done. So again, this isn't rocket science. It's just trying to find those simple tools to help you as a B2B and B2C business to grow. And we developed out this actually lead generation form for an IT consultancy in Bermuda. And all it is new sort of the equivalent of GDPR regulations that come in Bermuda over the past couple of months. And as an IT and sort of business consultancy, they want to again show people that they are experts in their field. So they just developed a 2-page guide, PDF, but what we then sort of promoted on their website is lead generation. And as a B2B business, I would strongly encourage you to look for opportunities for you to give a nugget or a piece of content in return or exchange for email addresses. And that builds up your bank that you can then sort of filter into your CRM systems, and CRM being just your sort of sales systems like the likes of HubSpot. And again, I know I'm under pressure for time, so the final thing really is loyalty and retention. And again, just to honour the two businesses today, I think you're doing an amazing job in email marketing. This email for outdoor rugs was just so pretty, and as was Laura's upcoming event. But I cannot stress to you how powerful email marketing is for that loyalty and retention piece and getting people back to shop with you. In terms of B2B loyalty and retention, what I would say is, again, using things like LinkedIn newsletters. I have a HR consultant that I work with as well, and I think this is a fabulous idea. He runs a Zoom class every single month on an expert topic or something that's topical, and he just calls it the Top Tips HR Zoom like webinar or whatever. So every single month he sort of runs it, and I jump on to them regularly. And it's something that's maybe changed, like minimum wage or things like that, how to navigate it. So it's keeping your sort of B2B business in that sphere to keep them engaged, I suppose, and interested in your business. And the final thing there is just to upsell. I think as a B2B business, try to look at ways, I suppose, for using digital tools to upsell other services that you offer. This is my final slide, you'll be happy to know. So in terms of B2B trade, so we're working with a couple of clients at the minute actually who are now recognising that e-commerce offers a really, really good opportunity to deal with their trade consumers. And they're building those sort of solutions on the likes of their Shopify sites. So there's some really amazing tools out there. One that we've used in the past called SparkLayer that just plugs into Shopify, and it's actually quite powerful in the fact that it gives your trade consumer a different experience to your retail consumer. And what that different experience looks like is exclusive access to products, volume discount, flexible payment options, bulk ordering, things like that. So again, a lot of what I've talked about today is really just looking at the opportunities that are there. Just sit down, write it down in a one-page document to say, what are the things that I could make easier for my consumers? What are the things I could do better using e-commerce or digital tools? And just to leave you on a note, users based in Northern Ireland were the ones spending the most time on Amazon in November 2024 around Black Friday, and it was about 290 minutes. So I'm a real big passionate advocate of not necessarily taking away business from Amazon and driving it into the local economy here in Newry. And I think just to end, it's just keeping things simple and working together as a collective. So I'd encourage you all to fill out the survey if you can. We want to make sure that we understand where you currently are in your e-commerce journey, and we want to be able to work as a collective to improve that over time. Thank you very much.